Welcome friends to this next edition of the Heartfulness Wellness webinars. As you can imagine, in this period of lockdown, there is a lot of introspection that we all of us get the benefit of doing. And then we find solace in objects of love that are around us, whether it is music, whether it is art, whether it's dance, and all other cultural forms. Today, we thought we will dive deeper into one of those facets, which is fine art, which is paintings, which is sculptures. On the title that we've given is The Heart of the Matter. He and the art come together. When him and the art come together, we have a different manifestation, which you can even see in a painting that we'll see on Lord Krishna. And going deeper into the subject, art which is created by the artist with his deeper introspection, and when he is into a state of oneness with his ultimate, has a different vibration, has a different vibe, which a viewer who's sensitive can actually draw solace from. I think that fundamentally is the true quality of real art. Obviously, it decorates a wall, obviously, it has a function. But to someone who's sensitive to the real qualities of art, and if he's fortunate enough to come in contact with the work of a master who himself is sensitive to transfer his condition to the painting, then there is magic. We will try to discuss some of this with a real example of an artist who's truly sensitive, who's very deep in her practice, who has balanced these two of very deep spiritual journey and a very deep journey towards art. Miss Kathleen Scarborough, based out of France. She has been with the art practice for a good 50 years, co-founder and member of Friends of Community Public Art, Joliet in Illinois, US, member of the Society for Art of Imagination in London, and member of the Maison des Artistes in Paris, France since 1981. Besides having a distinguished career of paintings, she has also a very significant focus on public art, where she's done a good 18 life-size sculptures in bronze and bronze resin, which is a composite in various cities in the US. Her journey is very interesting, has a lot of affinity towards India, and we would love to hear more from her now as to guide her through her journey as an artist and as an individual. Obviously, the two can rarely be separated. Over to you, Kathleen.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Kathleen Scarborough. I'm a painter and sculptor and mosaic maker. I have been practicing, as Rishi said, for the last 50 years or so. And of course, I am also a meditator. And these two aspects are totally intertwined in my life and have been since the beginning. I think an aspiration towards spirituality is something that you start sensing as a child and eventually opens up by some form of practice at some point in your life. For me, the importance of a master in an artistic pursuit is absolutely essential. I know that not everyone feels that way, but in my life path, it was absolutely essential. And I had 3 masters. First, my father, who was a musician and an engineer, and who taught me how important it was to know how to concentrate on something, what it meant to work for days, weeks, and months on the same project. He really taught me about drive. And because he was an artist himself, he never prevented me from pursuing my own path, which was really quite a gift, because most parents don't take it well when their university school daughter says, I think I'll be a painter. So that was master number 1. Master number 2 was my painting master, who was a man from Trinidad, a man named Patrick Betaudier, a fabulous technician who had studied in England and had studied the techniques of the great masters. So he taught me the Renaissance technique that I used up till today and continue to use, and taught me basically how to compose, how to work from the model, everything that I know came from him. And then master number 3 was my meditation master. And that person, I'd say, was probably the key to the success of the whole story. Because it's one thing to have a technique and it's another thing to have drive, but it's something else to know who you are, what your message is, and who will receive that message and in what form. And those were things that became clear to me through meditation.
Wonderful, Kathleen. That's a very, very inspiring journey, and so glad that you're lucky enough to have got those 3 masters in your life to guide you. Going back to the subject of spirituality again, I would love to refer to the painting in the background now. I mentioned earlier about Lord Krishna. I had to mention earlier as well that besides contributing to the Heartfulness Institute, I've also run an art practice called Aura Art, where I'm a co-founder with the family. And recently we had this benefit of doing a show only on Lord Krishna. And the painting in the backdrop you can see is of Dr. Shail Choel. It's quite a stunning piece where what the artist is doing in some way is depicting that Lord Krishna is pulling all the negativity and the fire in the forest, which is attacking the animals and the people, and sucking it in. And literally it's like a flute of fire, where the fire is moving inside him. So he's drawing all the difficulties that are there in the world. And obviously, it's a very deep Indian philosophy in a contemporary form. What I can see behind you, Kathleen, also are very sensitive works which have a very Indian representation. So I would like you to dwell on this a little further now as to in your journey, and we can actually go back to your journey from your early childhood to now as an artist, and where does India fit in, and how did you get this affinity and fondness towards Indian subjects in your works?
Very early on, I was hired to do public art. And so my first really big job was in 1977, doing a mural for the Mexican community in Joliet, Illinois. So this is my first experience of working with a population that was different from my own background. And it was an edifying experience because at first I thought I could treat the subject in an interesting way. And when I first showed my study to the Mexican community, they said, "We don't see ourselves like that. We see ourselves differently." And so they told me how they saw themselves. So this is my first opening into the idea that the audience is extremely important and that the message is extremely important. So as I worked along, for some reason, I can't explain why, public art always came to me. I have done no promotion. I've made no phone calls. I haven't tried to find this type of work, but it found me. So I spent, from 1977 until today, working in the public arena. I spent 10 years working in Reunion Island, where I was, my paintings describe traditional Creole lifestyle. And then when I discovered meditation, then I discovered India. And India was such an exciting subject from every point of view, that there was the spirituality, there was the incredibly colorful panorama. There were a myriad of interesting things to see, iconographically speaking, objects, people, and ideas that were extremely fascinating. So I plunged into that subject when I began meditating, and it is a limitless subject, and I continue to work in that direction to this day. One thing I would add about working on a community that is not your own is that you have an interesting vision of the other. And when you're in your own world, you take everything for granted. How you dress, the way you decorate your home, how people do things, how they make phone calls, how they cook a potato. And when you go into another culture, everything is new to you. And so you can bring an interesting vision of that other culture that they don't see themselves because they're used to it as being their own. It's their daily lives. They see nothing particularly exciting about how they cook the potato. But we can when we come from another point of view. So it's very interesting to look at another culture, and it's also proof that culture exists, but we can transcend. We can go to the essence of what it means to be a human being and what it means to express something about human life, even if we haven't been born into that culture. We can express any culture because we're all human, and that's basic. Our basic culture is being human.
No, fantastic. If we could actually go into one or two of the specific paintings behind you and understand what the characters mean and what is the technique also you followed to make those, they're wonderful also.
Okay, you can see behind me a painting of two little girls. And these two little girls are from southern India, and they are playing. And the name of the painting is simply Joy. And it is the joy of childhood, the joy before any type of pressure is put on the human being. The small childhood time of life is often, for many of us, at least for me, it was also a time of total freedom and total exploration. So that is what I was aiming for in this painting. Now, in the book, which I have just published, called Vagabond Soul, I coupled this painting with a poem by Sarojini Naidu about childhood. And it bounces off of it in the sense that in the poem by Sarojini Naidu, she sees the childhood as the moment before you begin to live, because for her, living is confronting difficulty, pain, and obstacles. So, and when I did this book called Vagabond Soul about my paintings and about Indian poetry, each time I looked, it took me 2 years to find the poems. I looked for poems from Indian writers that either were parallel in their meaning or added a different meaning or more another way of looking at a situation.
Fantastic. Can we know a little more about this book of yours? Because I think there's again a very strong India connect in the book.
Okay. Here's the book is in French and in English, so it's completely bilingual. In English, it's called Vagabond Soul, and in French, it's Âme Vagabonde. And inside the book, you can see that on each page, on one page, you have a painting, and on the facing page, you have a poem. So what I'm trying to do with this book, and the reason that I thought it was an important thing to do, is that here in Europe and in the United States, Indian literature is totally underappreciated. I mean, there are fabulous writers in India. And when you speak even to highly educated French people, you say, okay, how many Indian writers do you know? It's kind of like saying, how many Indian painters do you know, I might add, Rishi. How many famous Indian writers do you know? Usually you get a blank stare. Well, it's a shame. You know, this is a country that has a culture that's gone back millenniums. They have a fabulous literary past. So the idea of the book is for the Western world to get little snippets of some of these wonderful, the work by these wonderful writers from all times. I went back to Kabir and to Tukaram, and then I went forward to Arundhati Roy, the 20th century writers, trying to cover the entire panorama so that it would just be like giving an appetizer. And the person could say, okay, this writer I need to know more about, and look that person up. So that's kind of the reason for this book.
Oh, fantastic. I think you're acting as a true brand ambassador for India. How can we get a hand on this book?
Well, you can just go to my website and click on the link. It takes you directly to my editor if you wish to purchase a copy. This is volume 1. Volume 2 will be coming up. There are 40 paintings in it, and there'll be 40 paintings in volume 2 also. And with each page, 1 or 2 or 3 poems. So I hope it will be something that people will enjoy, kind of as a bedside book. You know, read a few lines of Amrita Pritam before you go to sleep.
Wonderful. I'm sure when this lockdown opens up, we'd love to have you over to India to do a show of your paintings and also launch this book in India. because you're really being a great ambassador for India, actually. So I like the way you emphasized a lot about the people around you in Europe and how you are catering to serve a purpose by the book. As an artist, how important is therefore the viewer to you? In India, we call it the darshak, who obviously is there and is not there. Can impact your practice or not impact your practice. That's entirely up to the artist. Where do you see that role of the darshak?
The audience is really probably at least as important, if not more important, as the work itself. If you go back through art history, you will see that the audience was always essential. In Egyptian art, it's the cosmology of the Egyptian culture. The art was totally integrated into it. All through the Greeks, the Romans, European art, the audience was basically who made the artwork possible. Because if you don't have an audience who pays you, then you're doing something else to earn your living. So it was essential not to do other things simply because I wanted to spend all of my time getting better at painting pictures or doing sculpture. What happened in the 20th century is, in a way, a deviation from the past. In the sense that in the past, if you were going to do a painting, say Liberty Leading the People by Delacroix, you obviously were going to have someone who paid you to work on this huge format that's 5 meters wide and ends up in the Louvre. So it's not something that was separate before. The artist was a totally integrated society. He had a role and he could get in big trouble. I mean, Baron Gros threw himself in the Seine over an artistic problem. He killed himself over it. So it's very recent that we've decided the audience is so much less important. Now, for me, the audience was always essential because in public art, I'm always telling someone's story. The artist, in a lot of ways, is the voice that the people need to express basic important ideas about themselves, their aspirations, their ideals. So when I'm hired by a school, for example, to do a mural, they tell me, okay, the children aren't reading enough, all right? What can I do to help you? What I can do to help you is do a work of art showing that reading is enjoyable, it's enriching, it's not drudgery. So each time that I would have a client of this type, be it a church or a city entity or a school, we would have these discussions. What's important for you? And then I would respond to that. So the audience is absolutely essential to the story. And without them, I don't exist. You don't sing alone in a forest and you build on in a vacuum. All those who did this activity before you can help you, even if they're no longer physically present. They're there, they did the work, you can see it, and you can learn from it.
No, that's fantastic. Actually, that sort of opens up, I think, our thinking in India in particular on various subjects. There is some bit of straitjacketization in the practices that's coming, where certain artists only do paintings of what people assume to be self-inspired. And when commissioning projects come or public art comes, more often than not, the best of artists are not participating in those because it's considered to be something where there is interference in your practice because of the brief given by someone or because there is a desired objective. What are your views on that? Does it hinder you when there's a brief, or does your best work still come out?
Well, just look at art history. All we have to do, if we want to believe that's true, is look at art history. How many Madonnas were painted and how many were absolutely bring tears to your eyes? There are plenty of Madonnas painted out there, good, bad, and ugly. But the real genius transcends the commission. He gives them more than they ever thought they would get. All they wanted was a lady with a baby in her arms. And then here comes Raphael, or here comes Bellini. And they gave them 1,000,000 times more than they requested. So that's a false argument. If it were true that it somehow that diminishes the artist's freedom and that he cannot be a genius if he does a commission job, then we have to throw out all of art history. That's ridiculous, right?
Well, I'm so glad you've taken the argument headlong, because there's been this debate and division. And
yes,
then comes the next challenge.
It's a recent event, this debate. This debate has existed for a short amount of time. They were talking like that when I was in university and when I was in art school, but it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up to logic. It doesn't hold up to what art has been about for millenniums. So it can't be a good argument.
No, I'm glad you got this clarity. On the other spectrum of this pendulum is that public art very often is either patronized by a real estate developer or the government, and the tendency then is to go and tender out the cheapest art, because finally it's a chicken and egg. They do not believe that a common man can understand the best of art, and budgets are a constraint. So why not go and get the cheapest art just to fill a space? Obviously, it doesn't relate well to us.
Yeah, that's the result of ignorance and lack of education, unfortunately. Now, what happened in the United States in the 1950s was really interesting with the mural movement, because the artists got so tired of being alone in their studios and nobody knowing who they were or caring what they did, that they started the mural movement. And that mural movement was inspired by the Mexican muralists. So the entire mural movement in the United States has a kind of a Mexican flavor to it. And so what I think is that it's the artists themselves who they gave up their role in society thinking they wanted all this freedom. But what they did is they made themselves trivial. No, the society never needed them anymore. So we have to take that place back. It's up to the artist to say, I want to be in contact with the population. I want people, my art to be in places where it can be seen, where it can be enjoyed, and where it has meaning for a population. That's for us to do. I don't think the government's going to do it. I don't think any client's going to do it. The client who comes actually, like you said, wants something pretty simple, but we can give them more. And we can give them that spiritual plus that they never even thought about. So we can kind of sneak in values that weren't necessarily in the contract.
No, fantastic. I'm glad you've led the direction of discussion to where I was hoping to go. How important has your spiritual journey and the spiritual practice that you've been doing to your art practice?
I never would have made it without it. I never would have made it as far as I went without it. Because when you're a young artist, you go to art school and the formatting begins. Now you need to go to art school because you have no tools. You don't know how to draw, you don't know how to paint, you don't know which brush to choose, you don't know how to make a medium or emulsion, you don't know anything, okay? So you go to art school and then they start telling you what art is. Of course, I went in the 1970s, so they're telling me about all these different things that don't interest me, really. I'm trying to find myself, trying to find my position. And there's the problem of who's making money and who's famous and what's being shown in the galleries. So what can you do in a situation like that? You look for yourself. And what is meditation good for? It's for going within, finding who you are. It doesn't matter what all those people do. It doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, successful or not. You find your path, your way of being, and you develop as an individual artist or simply as a human being. You know, I would say the same thing applies to life. It's not just art. Anyone who is trying to go against their nature to please anyone is going to become unhappy. So through meditation, going deeply within, you start discovering who you are. And then you say, well, they can all be anything they want. I don't have to satisfy anyone. I just have to figure out who I am and what I have to give to others. Because basically, any kind of art has to do with sharing and giving. So you find out what is your gift? What could you give that could be of value to the other? That's the only thing that matters. And meditation is wonderful for that. And without it, I don't think it's possible. An artist who really wants to be good cannot decide that he doesn't need to know who he is. It's essential for him to know who he is. It's essential for him to know that he has an individual personal message that he can deliver to the rest of humanity. How to find that? It's not in the art world, it's not in the galleries, it's not in the schools you'll find that, but it is in meditation you will find it.
No, I'm so glad. My mind just drifted to a webinar we had 2 days back on interiors and art, where we discussed healthcare as an important category, where I think art has been ignored, at least in India. We have good art in homes, offices, hotels, but not in hospitals. And mind you, in situations like these, people are, even otherwise, if you are unlucky enough to land up in the hospital, you're there for a few weeks and staring at a wall. And there is this whole debate, at least in the West, about art having therapeutic and healing properties. And at least the other way around, it's very simple, that if the art is not positive, then it can actually suck out the energy of a fragile pursuit.
I love Francis Bacon, but I wouldn't want him in my living room. You know, I love his paintings, but you know, wake up and drink my coffee looking at that in the morning, I couldn't do it.
No, absolutely. So what I was coming to is, how important do you think already is art therapy as a practice? I'm not saying as a defined practice as alternate healing. I'm simply referring to art having therapeutic properties, that people become more sensitive, therefore, to the selection of art they choose to make in their environments, at home, in the offices, knowing that there is some vibe, some energy emanating from the art. What are your views on that?
If it were up to me, there would be art in every hospital and in every school. I actually did a mural for the Omega School in Chennai, in Manapakam. And I would put art everywhere. In fact, in the school I went to in the United States, high school, there were murals there. It should be everywhere. It's an expression of an entire population. And when a society invests in art, they are showing they are no longer just surviving, they're thriving and prospering. It says a lot about the population itself. And if you raise a child in a really ugly place, let's say a really ugly place, or you raise a child in a garden, there's going to be a huge effect on that person's outlook. So we need to be surrounded by beauty. And why do people go to Florence? Why do people go to Venice? There's these little pockets of absolute beauty, and we feed on it. And I would say what we need to do is bring that, and that we're living in prosperous societies, but that beauty isn't really always there. It's often not there. We need to bring that back. We need back the human feeling in these metal and glass buildings, for example. It's too inhuman. When you look at the way architecture looked before we got into this megalomania of building higher and more metal and more glass, there was something fun and human about the old buildings. You know, the old buildings on the skyline in Chicago in 1925, they were charming. What happened? What happened to our environment? You know, we need to bring that back to feel better in general, and to be surrounded by beautiful things that will make us feel better.
No, you're absolutely bang on there. Also, in this lockdown, we are seeing that the good part is that people are also engaging a lot with art now. Earlier, this used to just be children, you know, doing a hobby class in art, which was sometimes optional, sadly, in India. Now it is parents and elders and friends, you know, exchanging their first sketch and their first stroke on the brush, on the canvas, and enjoying that. What are your views on the role of art as an activity to engage and bind people who are not artists really, but just coming there for the sake of it?
I think it's very important for every engage in an artistic activity. It's not just the artist who should be doing this. I mean, if you come from a family, in my family, we sang and danced and painted every day. It was just life. It's just what we did. I didn't know until I was much older that most families didn't do that. And I feel that it enriches the life of the person. Also, if you think of an art, say ballet dancing, okay? You send your daughter off to take ballet classes because she wants to wear the tutu and she likes the moves. Okay, that's fine. But as that person becomes older, so what if she doesn't become a dancer? When she sees someone dance, she knows what she's looking at. So you're promoting the entire phenomena by getting everyone involved, because you only really can get excited about something if you actually have tried it yourself, tried to get better at it, realize that it's an enriching activity for you, but also for all of society. So it can open all these doors within people's minds and make them open to more art in their environment and want to bring it back in, like I said, the way it was in previous times. So as far as children are concerned, it's a wonderful way to concentrate their attention, to have them have quiet times. Whenever I did a little bit of teaching, I haven't done, but when I did, I noticed that when I was teaching art, what was I really teaching? I was teaching you that you needed to really think about what you were doing. You needed to have good concentration. You need to not stare out the window, somebody walked by. Focus, focus, focus. That's what you learn from an artistic activity, of being quiet inside and focusing on an activity and having a laser type attention on just one act that you're doing. That's of great value to anyone.
You're actually making it sound as if artists should really be enjoying this lockdown and letting their creativity flow. How are you managing this time?
I've had a great time. Well, I spend my whole life in my studio, but at least this time I could even, with no qualm, say no meetings, no parties, no, promotion. I'm just going to paint and then do some gardening. It's been great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And as you mentioned, as people now dabble with art, they are able to better understand what great art is. And now I see that feedback from our friends of the struggle, that how do you get original inspiration? Typically what they'll do is they'll take a magazine, they'll see something on the net and copy that, which is fair to start with. How would you guide someone on how do you get original? I know it's not the easiest of things to do.
Here's how you find your inspiration. Like I said, you cannot say, I don't need to know myself. There's something that's important to you. There are probably a few things that are very important to you. Are you worried about the ecology, for example? Well, there's your subject. You're worried about the state of nature and how it's being destroyed wherever. So you say, okay, that's my subject. Now, how can I deliver this message through a work of art? Well, nature is a wonderful subject and full of beautiful things. So there you go. So then when you start looking for your subject matter, you've already got a backbone to your idea. The idea is not to just, we all love doing pretty things, but a pretty thing is just a pretty thing. But you must not forget that art is basically communication. So you have a message. What is your message? What's important to you? What do you love the most? That's what you should be expressing.
Oh, that's really fantastic. So I think fundamentally, every time we are fortunately circling back to really going deep within yourself and finding that inner connection. And you have mentioned meditation as a great tool to do that. Can you specifically walk us through the practice that you've done and how that has more tangibly helped you? And again, I think a part of your India journey will come back from that.
Well, India was not really on my agenda when I was 30 years old. So I hadn't even thought about it. It wasn't one of my ideas to go there or anything. And then one day I was invited by a friend to a group meditation that was open to the public. And I thought, well, there's something I've never done. I wonder what that's like. So I went. And the effect on me could only be defined as spectacular. I was totally absorbed in a wave of well-being and joy. I remember my friend looked at me and said, you've fallen into a condition that can only be described as prenatal bliss. So apparently it was obvious by looking at me what had happened. Well, of course.
This session was in France, just to clarify. This session was in France. This session you had?
Yes. It was in Paris at the Theosophical Society auditorium. Wow. And at that time, the leader of our group of meditation was Chariji. So anyway, this man is sitting in a room. I go into the room. Something amazing happens. Now, he doesn't know me. He's not looking at me. I'm a stranger to him. I am having trouble connecting my feeling up with this person who basically, he wasn't even started the meditation yet. He was staring at the floor and saying nothing. So this was quite a situation. You know, this was totally incomprehensible to me. It fell outside of all of my life experiences up to that point. So I thought, well, whatever it is, I have to know more about this. And I mean, you can't have a reaction like that to something and then say, okay, I'm going to go home and forget it. So he was in Paris for 2 or 3 days. I came for those 2 or 3 days. Every time I got near where he was again, and we began to meditate, I had that, once again, that wonderful thing of fulfillment and bliss. And okay, well, I have to, like I said, I have to pursue this. So I took up the practice. And then, of course, that led to my interest in India, my interest for him as a person who had taken on this role of leading us to this journey. And so, although I never met Bapuji, I became interested in Bapuji also, the preceding leader of the group. And so, because I felt so grateful for what he had given me, I'm speaking of Chariji, I decided to do a portrait of Bapuji because I thought that would make him happy and he would enjoy it. And so that was how we met, is I came and gave him a portrait. And it was an amazing experience for me to do the portrait. I have to admit, I was trying to come out of my anonymous position and be noticed by a person that I greatly admired at this point. So my goals were somewhat selfish. You know, I wanted him to know who I was and pay some attention to me. But what happened, and this is some of the funny things that happened in your meditation, is that the experience of doing the painting brought on an incredible condition that everything after that was just anecdotal. In other words, alone in my studio in Paris, I'm painting a portrait of this man who I've never met, and a condition descends that was, like I said about the first meeting with Chariji, nothing less than spectacular. So then when I actually presented the painting to him, I felt a little silly because I felt whatever reward I was hoping for, I had already received it, and that nothing could compare to the intensity of the moment when I received that. And it was a very important moment too, because then I realized that you don't have to be this person. You don't have to know the person. An aspiration and your willpower that is directed in a specific direction for a period of time. The painting took me about 2 months, and it was freezing cold in Paris. All I did was eat soup, paint, and sleep for 2 months. I had that time off. Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
I've seen the print. So there were 3 paintings of Bapuji, one below the other.
Yes,
did you compose them as one, or there were 3 separate paintings which you fused later?
Oh, it's one painting with 3 views of Bapuji. So, you know, that's important to know. You think someone needs to give you something, or you need to receive something, or there has to be some intermediary. Well, it's not true. There doesn't have to be any intermediary between you and your spiritual goal. And I think now the way Heartfulness has developed with the direction of Kamlesh Patel, he has really made that clear. Because during Chariji's time, we were very attached to him as a person and wanted to be in his presence and wanted him to help us. And now it's gotten to, first of all, there are many, many people involved now, but it's also becoming very clear that it's within you you're going to find the answer. You don't need to ask anyone anything or go anywhere. If your aspiration is deep and powerful, your spirituality will develop because it's a law of nature. You don't have to worry about it. And so that, I think, is a very interesting aspect of what Heartfulness is doing for humanity now.
Oh, fantastic. I'm finding it so difficult to continue this conversation because you put me into a meditative state. I'm so glad. I'm reminded of a quote by Thomas Merton, that art enables us to find ourselves and lose ourselves at the same time. And I think despite your art, just even your talk is making us lose ourselves. I'm so glad. But coming back to this Bapuji's print, which I've enjoyed for over a decade, uh, and the painting behind you, there are a lot of layers and layers, and
Yes.
there is a geometric synergy in the whole painting. Can you sort of draw some light on that technique? I think it's a little technical question, but I'm very curious to know that.
Well, there was a school in Chicago that was, remember I was talking about the Mexican influence on the American mural movement. I have retained one aspect of, say, like Diego Rivera's paintings, which is there are often a number of images in the same painting. It's something that I really enjoy, is not only treating a subject, but treating it in different ways in the same painting and giving different views of it. So that's kind of become my style. I like to mix elements together that have a relationship to each other and communicate with each other and all together express an idea. So that's one thing that I like to do. Now, the other thing is simply technique. The Renaissance technique is a technique of oil glazes. It's a laborious, time-consuming technique, but for people like me who enjoy those types of activities, that's okay too. And the richness of color is developed over layers and layers and layers of transparent, vivid color.
No, it's really fantastic. Actually, I have fortunately been part of a family which has been collecting art for a couple of decades and engaged very deeply with artists and seen how in different experiences, the work of an artist is able to 5-10 years later sitting in the wall of a collector, actually at two stages of interaction. First, when the collector comes to our gallery and views the art for the first time, I've seen that, wow, there's something opening up in the heart of the collector. And then after it's in the house for 5 years, that message has only grown and the painting has become deeper for them. And this magic, I think I've understood that more from you today, how this magic moves, from your condition to the art, and that comes to the viewer. I'm so glad you sort of clarified this. I was also fortunately, while I'm involved in the arts, but my activity is more commercial. And in this lockdown, I had the benefit of going through a documentary which is 50-year-old on the net on 5 editions of the life of Da Vinci, and it was really, really inspiring as to how he has gone through so many challenges in life, changed cities, didn't have an idea of parentage, constantly chased patronage, had a scientific bent at the same time, was involved with people, but at the same time isolated in his life. There were so many such challenges. Obviously, you are staying closer to that period, to that geography that he is, and how his works, which were created 500 years back, are still able to transfix the audience, and obviously quote at fancy values, right? The Salvador Mundi has auctioned 1.5 years back at $450 million, which is nearly 2,940 crores. 3,000 crores, $450 million is a lot of money by any stretch of imagination for a work which again has, challenging provenance and history and was significantly restored. So clearly there is value in the art on the commerce side, and there is very deep intrinsic value in the art because it can't talk to so many hearts for so long. Mona Lisa has inspired millions and millions of viewers. I think some of it is a Me Too, where everybody likes it, so you have to like it. But I'm sure some people are very deeply moved with that. So what would your parting message be to connect, like I said, Da Vinci connected art and science in a way. You are very beautifully connecting art and spirituality. No doubt he was also very deeply he was a philosopher at the same time, besides being an artist and scientist. What would be your parting message for all of us who are hearing, to art lovers, to art patrons, to art artists, and to the community at large?
I would say the world is suffering from lack of unity and love, and that the art can make that bridge. It can help construct it. And we all need each other. We're all dependent on each other. There's one thing about spirituality is it says we are all one. And art that is really top notch. You get that feeling when you look at it. When you look at a painting by Leonardo da Vinci, you feel the love for humanity just come pouring out at you. And how did he do that? I don't know. It's a mystery. It's the mystery of art. So the artist needs to be strong enough within, not only to have the feelings, because what's an artist expressing? He's expressing your, he manages to put it on a format that you can be nourished by it, even when he's no longer of this world. So you are as important to that work of art as he is, because he is communicating something to you. And I would say that's spirituality and art in its essence. We have something to share. We have our love for each other, our love for our planet, our love for life itself. And so if you want to be an artist, great. Just remember, it's not about doing pretty things. It's about expressing your deepest feeling about the things you love most and the things you want to preserve. And if you do your very best work, you don't have to worry about it afterwards. Your paintings are never going to end up in the garbage, because someone is going to say, I don't know who did this. Don't forget that these famous painters that we love now, some of them were completely forgotten for centuries. And then somebody pulls out a Georges de la Tour that they found in an attic in France. Well, why was it in the attic? Well, the person who had it didn't know what he had, but he knew that he couldn't just get rid of it and that it had some value because it was obviously very well done. So things will survive way beyond us if we put the proper ingredients, which are high technical skills and connecting with the deepest self, so that the other can receive a beautiful message.
No, it's a phenomenal parting thought at a time when I think the world can do with much more succor. Like how they do in the reality shows, they suddenly bring your close friend or relative on the show. We thought we will spring a surprise to you with your deep influence and fascination for Chariji. I think Kathleen has been fondly referring to Shri Panchachi Rajagopalaji, who was the president of Sri Ramchandra Mission and Heartfulness. And it's unbelievable how the resonance is there in their thoughts and in words. What Chariji said is, an artist leaves his love for nature behind in his painting. I mean, how more profound can that be? Artist has intuitive perception into the laws of existence. So this again brings us to the jugalbandi between art and science. What's something that Da Vinci, I think, struggled to prove all his life, and his whole life is a case study of that. He had to very push his scientific capabilities and ability to make weapons and bridges in the fore to actually get attention and eventually let his art take over. And I think this is one of my favorite quotes. And what do we admire in the painting? It is the way the artist has resonated with existence, and that resonance produces something there, and which we vibrate with again, like when you pluck a string, another one with the same pitch vibrates in resonance, and if there is a third one, it too starts vibrating. This is the fundamental truth that I have grappled with for decades to understand, and it's taken this session for me to get this clarity, that the artist has a particular frequency at which he's operating. He's able to, a good artist, a great artist is able to charge his work with that same frequency of vibration. And when a viewer, 1 year later, 5 years later, 50 years later, 500 years later, in the case of, our frescoes, 5,000 years later, comes a viewer with the same frequency, stands in front of that work, the core message of the artist and the sensitivity of the artist gets injected into the heart of the viewer through, what I would call a magic transmission, which something is also the core essence of the practice in heartfulness. This is the miracle that happens when we look at art, when we look at anything that love has produced. So what is this transmission from the art? It's love of the artist. Likewise, the transmission that a disciple receives during meditation is the love of the master, love of the nature, love of this guide poured into his heart, which actually helps him get into a deeper state and changes his condition fundamentally. Thank you very much, viewers. I think this is clearly a session where I have learned a lot. I hope you could also benefit from it in some way. Make the most of this challenging time that we have to go deeper, to go inwards. Heartfulness offers you various tools besides these webinars that happen daily currently on the wellness side. Periodicity may change. There are many other interesting sessions that happen, and you can also access the heartfulness.org or the mobile app, look at masterclasses and other ways to engage with the practice and deepen your experience towards life. Thank you and have a great day.